everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you came to visit me tonight to listen to my story that I have to tell you tonight. And for those of you who are visiting the first time, welcome, and I hope that you might consider joining my YouTube family. And for the regular people who come on here all the time, thank you so much for visiting again. And tonight I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the jobs that I've had in my life. I've had a lot of different occupations, if you want to call them an occupation. Most of the jobs that I had, I worked in factories. And that being because I was a high school dropout. And I didn't really have any kind of special skills, any training skills. So most of the factories that you work in, at the time that I was working in, they were willing to train you to do what they needed you to do. Now a lot of them you do have to have a GED or a high school diploma to even get in the door. But at the time that I was working there, that wasn't a necessity. So I have some different ones here. These are not all the places that I've worked. These are just some of the ones that I thought would make a really good video for you guys to watch. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about each one and why I picked that particular job to tell you about in this video. And the first one that I'm going to put up here is the very first job that I ever had. And I was 16 or 17 years old. I was a waitress in a cafe called the Hollywood Cafe. Now, I was married at that time because, like I said, I dropped out of school and got married at 16. And my mother-in-law actually got me the job there. Now, I had never worked any place outside the home except for I babysitted for my brothers and sisters. And then in the wintertime, us kids would go around and shovel sidewalks off for a little bit of money. So I really knew nothing about the working force. And she got me a job working there as a waitress. I knew nothing about waitressing. It was very confusing to me because I didn't know, after I took the order, I couldn't remember what table to take the food back to, what person ordered what. And I still remember this, and this happened many, many years ago. A customer had come in. I was working the day shift early in the morning for breakfast, and they had ordered a breakfast plate, which, come with the sausage and the eggs and the hash browns and whatever else it came with. Well, when they finished up their first serving of toast, they asked for another helping of toast. So I went back and put the order in, and the cook made the toast, and I brought it out and gave it to the customer and went on about my business. Well, they went ahead and paid up their tab and left. And as soon as they walked out the door, the owner of the business, the lady who was training me and hired me, come to me and told me, she said, you did not charge that table for that extra toast that you took out. So reach into your pocket and get in your tips and pay me for it. Yeah. She made me pay for their toast because I had forgot to write it on the ticket. I was a newbie at that. I didn't know that. But that stuck in my mind. And that made me pay attention. From then on, of course, I didn't work there very long, but from then on, if customers ordered something extra on top of what they had already had, I made sure I picked that ticket up and wrote it down. And the second job that I want to tell you about is the worst job that I ever had. And it was working in a factory. As I mentioned, a lot of the jobs was factory. And the strange thing about it is I worked in this place almost 20 years. This was a pretty recent job that I had. And it was in a factory making landscaping and insect-resistant products. That's what they labeled it at. Basically, it was making tarps. Tarps for everything. To go over chicken houses, on cars, tractors, bales of hay. The hardest thing about the job was when we got a contract for making these, what they called greens covers, that went over golf courses. Now, any of you out there that golf know how big a golf course is. I'm talking acreages of land. And we had to sew these tarps by hand. There was a team of 2 women that did it. Some of them could be as much as 110 foot wide by 250 feet long. And that was all done by hand with 2 women sewing it. It was extremely difficult. Now, I started there when I was a little bit younger. And as I went on in years and progressively got older, it just physically got extremely hard for me to pick up that material and lift those tarps. And that's why I ended up leaving from that job. And the next job that I want to tell you about is the best job that I ever had. And it was being a donut delivery girl. There was a small business in town that made donuts. And I had put my application in there to work, and the gentleman that worked there hired me to take the donuts that he made to another town and deliver them. The other town was about 20 miles from where this place was. And they gave me a company car, and they provided me with a cell phone so that in case I had any problems. And I had a list of places to go that I would take the donuts. I would get there early and help him box up the donuts, but then I would help him load it into the car and stuff. And then I took off by myself to deliver the donuts. It was mostly to hotels and quick stores, gas stations like the Flying J, truck stops, stuff like that. And then in some of the places, I even picked up the money. Once a week, like maybe on Friday, I picked up the money from the customers. Okay, and the next job that I want to tell you about, this is kind of along with the other one, my favorite job, and that was working in a bakery making the donuts. I was actually the donut maker. Now, I didn't start off as a donut maker. I started off as the donut fryer. And eventually people quit, and my position was moved up, and I was trained to actually make the donut. This place didn't serve frozen donuts. They were made from scratch. I'm talking flour, sugar, eggs, yeast, milk, everything, the whole thing from the beginning. We came in every morning, mixed up the dough, let it rise, rolled it out, cut it by hand. They were all handmade. And I was trained to do the donuts. And that was my favorite job. The easiest job that I ever had was working in a factory called IXL Handles. And my job was they'd bring me a box of raw handles that they had cut on a lathe that were just bare wood. And my job was to attach a hook to the top and hang them on these 2x4s and dip them down into a vat of lacquer to coat them and then hang them up to dry. That's all I had to do. I would, do one board and push it back, and do another and push it back. By the time I got the whole rack full, the first ones that I had done were dry, and I would walk around to the back and get the dry ones, take them down and put them in a box, and then go back up to the front and start all over again. That was the easiest job that I've ever had in my life. The next job that I had was the funniest job, and that was vaccinating baby chicks. Now, this job has been eliminated now, but at the time that I did it, I worked in a small hatchery. And as soon as the baby chicks were hatched, they come to another room where they cut their beaks off, they put drops in their eyes, and they vaccinated them for some kind of a disease that they got in the hen house. And we would actually have to pick up a baby chick, pinch up a little bit of skin on the back of its neck. We had a regular hypodermic needle with a plunger and a needle that we would stick in its neck and squirt the vaccine in, and then we'd put it in another. Pick up a chick, give it a shot, put it in a basket. We do that all day long. Now they have it set up to where they have a machine. I from what I understand is the girl picks up the 2 chicks, and there's a machine, and they just hold the chicks up to the machine, and the machine gives them the shots. So it's not like, I had to actually fill the tube up with medicine when it run out, and then, do the hypodermic. That was the funniest job that I've ever had. And the hardest job that I had, and this is actually the job that I'm working at now, is working in a meat department cleaning the machinery. I'm actually on the night cleanup crew, and I go in after everybody else has went home, and I have to take all that machinery apart, piece by piece, clean all the meat and everything out of it. Now, it doesn't stink. It's not rotten meat or anything like that, but it's kind of gross because you got like big chunks of fat wrapped around the gears and stuff, and all that blood's all over everything. I have to take all that apart, clean all the blood off, wash it, sanitize it, and then completely reassemble the whole machines. And there's like 1, 2, 3, 4 machines that I can think of in there that I have to take apart like that. Plus, some of the parts that come off are extremely heavy. Now, for a younger person, this would be an excellent job. They could probably fly right through it. For somebody my age, I find it extremely difficult to lift those heavy. I also have to clean off the tops of all the tables. I had to pull the tops off, take them to the sink, clean them, and then put the tops back in. And the tops are they're about that thick, and they're made out of some kind of white formica stuff. They're really heavy. And the most interesting job that I've had was I worked for a local newspaper office back in the day when they actually printed the newspaper out by hand. And I worked in the dark room developing the film. Now, they have computers that do it now on the photographs, you know, if they take for news stories. They have computers that actually develop the film now. But my job at that time, they actually trained me to do this. I knew nothing about it. To go into the dark room, and you had a vat of film where you would, you know, the room was completely dark, and you would put these canisters of film inside of a tunnel-like thing, and you take your hand in there and open them up, pull the film out. Then you had to hang it on these little things, dip it down in a chemical, and dip it down in another chemical. And then you had to hang it up and let it dry, and then the person that did the story, the reporter or the newspaper person, would attach a piece of paper to it telling you which particular photo they needed developed and how big they wanted it. And then you would have to put it on the enlarger machine and, you know, blow the picture up, make it to the size that they wanted to fill whatever column in the newspaper. I found that to be most interesting job. And the best paying job that I ever had was back in the 70s. I worked in a factory that made car exhaust pipes. I had to look down here to see what it was actually. And my job was a pipe bender. And that's exactly, my job was exactly like it sounds. I actually picked up a big heavy pipe, laid it underneath this machine, stepped on a pedal that came down with the thing and pushed down on it and actually bended, you know, whatever shape they needed to go over the wheel or up around the motor or whatever in the car. And my job title was pipe bender. And that was the best paying job. At that time in the town that I lived in, that was the best paying one. They may have some more now that pay better than, but this was back in the 70s. And the last job that I have down here was the most confusing job that I ever had. And it was working in a factory. It was called U.S. Poly Foam Cups. And they made those, they're called coolers, like you put around a beer can. Those little foam cuppy things that you stick your beer cans down into, or sodas or water. And then also the big, large plastic cups like this that have the foam sleeve around them, and they got a straw in them that you can drink out of and carry. That's what we made there. And my job there, and they trained me to do this. Once again, I worked in what was called the screen room, and that was where they took these wooden boards that actually had a screen material in it, you know, like this, and you would lay this template down on it that had the pattern for whatever design they were going to ink print. And you had to center it exactly in the center from top to bottom, left to right. It could even be like a hair off, because the girl that was training it would check after I laid it down. And if it was like even just a hair too much to the left, she would tell me, and I'd have to go back in and move it over to get it perfectly centered. And then we put it in on another machine that vacuumed, shut down on it, and turned on a light that burned it. They called it burning the screen. And it would actually burn out the design in the middle of the screen. And then there was another room where we took a water hose and we squirted, and all the area that wasn't burned, that stuff would wash off and just leave the image on there with paint. And then it would go to the room where they actually put the paint on it and rolled it across the foam cups to make the design. That's the cups that you drink out of. That's how we did them. So that's the story that I had for you tonight. I just wanted to tell you about some of the jobs. Those were the ones I thought of. There was a whole lot of other places that I worked at that I didn't mention. But mostly I did work in factories a lot. Some of them I hated and some of them I liked. But at the time in my life, that's what I did to survive. That's how I paid the bills and took care of myself. So I thank you so much for coming to visit me tonight. Anybody here that's new and this is your first video of mine that you've seen, I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe you'll give me a thumbs up. And those of you who have been supporting me, I appreciate your support. And y'all just come back and see me any old time. So bye. See you in the next video.